Chapter 651, Taming the Fifth Year Pledge. Can you forgive us in exchange for that information? Jeanette said quickly, the words tumbling out with desperate hope. We were brought with a bad purpose, yes. But, she paused, something like guilt crossing her face. We didn't have much choice. Our families ordered. We obey, or they throw us out. You didn't have much choice? Ren repeated, his anger diluting slightly at having heard only truths from them. Run, Kasia said with a softer voice now, vulnerability replacing the normal pretense of charm. We're just pawns. We were chosen as political pieces from birth, Serafina continued, her usual composure cracking to show the genuine emotion beneath. We wouldn't do this, but our families have reasons to want you to fail. Or at least, to want you not to have complete success. And you? Ren asked, looking between the three. His eyes moved from face to face, searching for the smallest lie. What do you want? Another heavy silence, full of things they'd never said, thoughts they'd never been allowed to voice. Honestly, Jeanette finally admitted, her voice small, at first we just wanted to fulfill our family orders and get out of this without problems. But after feeling your power, after meeting you, Kasia completed, we realized you're genuinely someone who deserves their rewards more than anyone, not like other nobles. And the idea of actively trying to sabotage you started to feel terrible. We were dying of fear too. That's why we never really tried it, Serafina added, her mana eyes dimming as she looked down. And we started to just play along with your games and answer what you asked. Within what we could. Ren observed them, trying to process all this. 3 girls who'd been sent to seduce or sabotage him, who'd failed at both because they couldn't bring themselves to actually go against him. It was complicated. So what happens now? Do your families expect reports? Results? Yes. All 3 said in unison, the word carrying the inevitable consequences. They're still strangely honest, Ren thought, confused. Are they very bad at their job as saboteurs? Do they hate their families? And if I tell you to leave now, Ren continued slowly, thinking through all this, what happens to you? Kasia looked down, her perfectly styled hair falling to hide her expression. We'd probably be punished for failing our mission, maybe given away, to pay some favor to some house to be married, to someone our families choose to recover from the error. The words were matter of fact, describing a fate she'd clearly contemplated before. Or less probable, but we may simply be thrown out, Serafina added with neutral voice that barely concealed pain beneath. Losing access to family resources. Opportunities, basically converted into family shames, Jeanette concluded bitterly. Ren felt something twisting in his chest. Anger at the injustice to these young women not having a real family like him, yes. But also something more complicated. Recognition, perhaps. He'd seen Luna struggle with family pressure, had watched Klein be destroyed by it before being able to rebuild himself. What if I pretend to believe you? He asked slowly, an idea forming. If I keep coming to these sessions as if nothing had changed, would that help you? All 3 looked at him with surprise, their composure slipping to reveal genuine shock. Is he offering to protect us? Kasia thought, incredulous. Or, is this another game? Layers of the same game from the beginning? Did he always know? After admitting we were trying to sabotage him, Serafina also thought, trying to understand the logic. He's genuinely too good to be true, Jeanette concluded, suspicion and hope warring in her chest. Run, Kasia said softly. Carefully, if you do that, it would help us, but only until the year ends and we fail anyway, when you receive all the rewards. Though we could try to use the time to divide the blame, it won't change the outcome much. I see, Ren admitted, processing the limitations. But I can't just let you suffer for something your families force you to do. Is he offering us an exit? All 3 thought simultaneously. What does he want? Technically you could, Jeanette pointed out, still incredulous but curious to hear the offer. But we try to sabotage you. We deserve the consequences. But did you really try? Ren asked, looking at her directly. His gaze was intense, searching for truth. You said that after meeting me, you stopped actively trying. That counts for something in my book. Serafina studied his face, her mana eyes gleaming with her active perception. I can't read your patterns clearly, but your expression, you really believe that, right? You forgive us. Yes, Rin said simply, the word carrying his absolute conviction. I don't like that you lied to me, but I understand that being trapped between family orders and what you really want to do must be very difficult. I've seen Luna deal with something like that several times. He paused, thinking through his proposal carefully. So here's what I propose. We continue with the sessions. You report to your families that the plan is advancing. I pretend I don't know anything. But between us, he looked at all three, his expression serious. Let's be honest from now on. No more lies. He wants us to be his double agents. All three realized simultaneously. I don't think we have a choice, but if we help you, what will happen to our families? Kasia asked, concern evident. I don't like many of them, but my mother and some relatives. The other two girls nodded as well, similar concerns written on their faces. I know, Rin sighed. I don't know if you'll like it, but now I'm going to explain what I'll do. Kasia stood, approaching him. Run, are you sure about this? Once you do that, it won't be easy to back out. And although Serafina seems to have seen truth in your mana, if you do it, you're going to make us look worse, and maybe even get us eliminated. Her voice had big concerns. I know, Rin said, meeting her eyes steadily. But yes, I'm sure. He paused. Just promise me that from now on, if your families ask you to do something, you'll tell me. Directly. The three exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. This was a line they'd never crossed before. Betraying family orders. Choosing someone outside their houses over blood obligations. Promised, all three said, extending their hands in turn. Ren shook each one, the gesture feeling more significant than it should, like sealing a pact that went beyond simple agreements. Then I guess we continue with social practice, Jeanette said with an ironic smile, some of her humor returning. Though now it's practice in pretending we don't know that you know the truth. Sounds exhausting, Ren admitted with a tired laugh. Real noble politics, Serafina responded, her lips quirking slightly. Where everything is pretending and nobody really knows who knows what. Ren let himself fall into a chair finally. His body felt heavier than after training with Lin, a different kind of exhaustion. I'm going to have to talk to Leora again, he said aloud, more to himself than to them. And with Larissa, and with Luna. The thought made his stomach twist with anxiety. Good luck with that, Kasia said with sympathy, understanding the minefield he was walking into. Jeanette sat beside him, her expression more serious than he'd seen before. Run, can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you protecting us? Seriously, you seem to have a high standard. We don't seem to appeal to you much. And after all, you could use your connections, your power, and your genius to stop the sabotage. Rin considered the question honestly, taking time to find the right words. I don't know why you're insinuating you're not pretty enough or why you think I'm a genius. But it's because if I were in your position, trapped between almost mandatory orders, I'd hope someone would give me the benefit of the doubt. And because he paused, some vulnerability entering his voice, because there are already enough people trying to use others as pawns. I don't need to be another person doing the same. The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning for the ladies. All three observed him in long silence, seeing him perhaps for the first time without all the layers of assumption clouding their perception. Your close circle is very lucky, Serafina said finally, her voice soft with awe. To have you. I'm not sure they think that right now. Rin responded with bitter smile, thinking of Larissa's tears and Luna's rigid departure. They will, Kasia said with confidence, certainty in her voice. Eventually, you're too much to ignore. I hope you're right, Rin murmured, doubt evident despite his words. Leora is going to kill me, he thought with resignation, already imagining the conversation ahead. And he was probably right about that. Chapter 652, Taming the Fifth Year, Pledge 2. Rin walked toward Larissa's room with steps that became slower as he approached. It wasn't by any particular preference that he was going to talk to her first. Talking to Leora again so soon would feel a bit more uncomfortable, even more so when he'd finished without getting rid of the enemies as she'd expected. Honestly, he was also a bit more afraid of Luna. She'd left the dining hall without saying a word, but her manna. Rin had felt the agitation in her patterns, violent and erratic despite her face remaining perfectly serious. So Larissa first. Larissa who had run away, yes, but whose manna had shown embarrassment more than fury. Embarrassment was easier to handle than fury. Probably, he hoped. When he reached Larissa's room door, he found it opening slightly. A figure was leaving, and Rin immediately recognized the imposing presence of Victor Dravenholm. The first prince and Larissa's older brother looked upset. His eyebrows were furrowed, his jaw tense, and there was something in the way his shoulders were squared that communicated frustration. When Victor saw Rin, his expression changed. Not to relief, not to joy, to something strange that Rin couldn't completely identify. Surprise and something darker. Something that made Rin's instincts warn him this wasn't going to be a comfortable conversation. Without saying a word, Victor approached with steps that weren't threatening but were very deliberate. His hand extended, grabbing Rin's shoulder with firmness that left no room for argument. And then he pulled him into the room. Rin blinked, allowing himself to be escorted, concerned more by confusion than anything else. Victor's manna showed no intention of attack. There was no real hostility, just urgency, and maybe a bit of exasperation. What's happening? When they entered the room, Rin found Julius seated in one of the chairs, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, and Arturo standing by the window with crossed arms, his expression more tense than Victor's. All three princes and Larissa wasn't in the room. "Looks like we saved ourselves some steps," Julius said with a calm tone, though his eyes studied Rin with an intensity that made him feel like he was being dissected. "But still, let him go, Victor, don't be like that. We should hear his version first." "His version," Arturo repeated with a tense voice, "of how he can do something like that without considering the feelings of the cutest girl of—" He cut off abruptly at Julius's extended hand, his face reddening slightly. Julius sighed, the sound carrying years of dealing with his brother's protective instincts. Victor looked to the side and also sighed, releasing Rin's shoulder finally. Rin felt increasingly uncomfortable, standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by three of the kingdom's most powerful men. He was beginning to understand that Larissa, or maybe Selphra, had said something about the situation, though he wasn't sure exactly what. What Rin didn't know, what could only be narrated beyond his perception, was that originally only Julius was going to come with Selphra. It was in response to Leora's message to talk to Rin about Aldrich and the three girls. A diplomatic conversation, adult, to understand what was happening. But Arturo had found out by accident. He had class with Rin and Zhao later that day, and had interrogated the maids when Mayo had let slip a laugh mentioning something about player Patender's romantic disaster. The problem was that between the rush, exaggerations, and errors of word of mouth, none of them knew the whole story. Larissa wasn't really upset with Rin. She was embarrassed, mortified for having almost shouted something she didn't want to admit yet, and for having lost control of her emotions, offending Rin with the word idiot that only someone like Mayo should use. Yes, she had fled from embarrassment more than from anger. But when Arturo had found her in the hallway, with red eyes and muttering something cryptically about losing control, annoying jealousy, and being an idiot for trying, Arturo had assumed the worst. That Rin, the player-cheater fuckboy Patender from the exaggerated rumors of years ago and his nightmares as an older brother, had returned with vengeance. That he was playing with Larissa's feelings. And without telling Larissa anything, without waiting to hear more context, Arturo had sent someone to get Victor too, to teach Rin a lesson, to show him that Larissa wasn't alone and intimidate him appropriately. That's why they were all here now. A misunderstanding about another misunderstanding. Arturo took a step forward, his presence filling the space. What a disappointment, after teaching you so much. Don't think you can take advantage of Larissa just because her brothers are busy and far away. We're here, always. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. And you need to understand something very clearly, Patender. I know that in high houses it's normal. Nobles of high ranks typically have between 3 to 5 wives. He paused, but accumulating them so young, in these quantities is disrespectful. Besides, there must be clear hierarchies. The houses must also be matched in power. Not just men, but vice versa. It's easier for someone like Selphra to have several husbands than to share a husband with someone because of her enormous influence. So as much as you're a genius destined for greatness, you can't disrespect royalty and the biggest houses. Ren opened his mouth, confused. Accumulating? You're already on thin ice with Larissa alone. Arturo continued without letting him interrupt, momentum carrying him forward. She's driving home. Royal house. And I know Selphra is hunting to get you in her family too, trying to secure you with Leora. You're going to have an enormous challenge matching the power of either of the two houses that are clearly chasing you. His voice hardened, taking on an edge sharp enough to cut. Not to mention the two together, or three if we count Lou. See, even my father Dragarian, the only true dragon tamer, only had 3 wives. 3, and he was Dragarian. The name carried weight. Even a legend nobody could match didn't play games. Arturo planted himself in front of Ron, looking at him directly, eye to eye, letting his full presence press down. So you better straighten up and... Arto, Julius interrupted with firm but calm voice, the tone of someone used to moderating. Enough. Let Ren speak. Victor, still with his hand on Ren's shoulder, sighed again. His grip loosened slightly, becoming more paternal than threatening. Ren, he said with voice softer than Arturo's, but equally serious. Is it true you're toying with the groups of girls that follow you? He made a significant pause, giving weight to the question. And when I say toying, I mean anything romantic. Flirting, promises, insinuations. Anything. No. Ren responded immediately, his confusion genuine and evident in every line of his body. Not at all. I find receiving so much attention at the same time uncomfortable, and I've been avoiding them. The 3 brothers observed his expression, felt his mana. The patterns were clear, stable, showing truth. It was true. Arturo relaxed slightly, though his frown remained. Suspicion didn't vanish, but it diminished, logic pushing back against protective instinct. Good. Victor continued, his interrogation methodical. And what about the 3 high-quality girls Aldrich brought you? The ones we know are backed by the numerous noble groups behind the latest not-so-impartial shenanigans in the noble rating organisms that should be impartial. Do you have something with them? Even a secret interest? Ren hesitated for a fraction of a second. No. Arturo tensed immediately, his senses honed from years of political maneuvering. Lie. There's a half-lie there. Chapter 653, Taming the 5th Year, Pledge 3. No, Ren said quickly, realizing the problem. Wait, yes, I have a secret, but the secret isn't about anything romantic. The 3 brothers exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. His mana showed it was true, completely true. No deception, no half-truths, just straightforward honesty. Julius closed his eyes briefly, something like relief crossing his face. The tension that had been coiled in his shoulders released slightly. Victor completely loosened his grip on Ren's shoulder, giving him an almost friendly pat instead. Arturo opened his mouth, clearly wanting to ask more about that secret and what it implied exactly. His curiosity was evident, political instincts wanting to understand what Ren was hiding. It's enough. Julius stopped him with a gesture, his hand raised again. We already interrogated, said what we thought, and made our points clear. He stood, approaching Ren, the interrogator becoming the advisor. Ren, I would appreciate it if you talked to Larissa, and recommend that you consider your future very carefully. He paused, his eyes studying Ren's face as someone who'd spent decades reading people. Because you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. And although everything could seem tasty, we must be measured. Choose well. Julius's tone was paternal, but with an edge that communicated this wasn't a suggestion, but a warning. The kind of advice that carried consequences if ignored. Ren swallowed, nodding. He understood, or at least believed he understood what they were trying to tell him about multiple relationships. Though he didn't get why they were pushing Larissa to him, they wanted to get him, like Selphra. Still, she was free to choose. He'd never used those politic shenanigans to pressure anyone, much less his friends. Leora and Luna, they seemed interested in different ways. But he'd have to see if those temporal crushes, as his father calls them, would not vanish easily by adulthood. Then he'd see what to do. They never last, so don't get too invested. It hurts, he used to say, trying to protect Ren's heart. Yeah, good luck with that mess, future me. The three brothers began moving toward the exit. Victor gave him another pat on the shoulder, this one definitely friendly. A gesture of approval, of acceptance into some unspoken club. Arturo looked at him for a long moment before nodding with something like reluctant approval, as if admitting Ren had passed a test he hadn't known he was taking. Julius stopped at the threshold, looking back with expression that had shifted to something warmer. By the way, he said with a more casual tone, the advisor voice replacing the usual Prince, look for her in the library. When Larissa gets like this, she tries to study or work on something to distract herself from her problems. And with that, all three left, closing the door behind them with a soft click that somehow felt final. Ren remained standing alone in Larissa's empty room, processing what had just happened. The confrontation played back in his mind, each moment feeling surreal in retrospect. He'd been interrogated, subtly threatened, warned about biting off more than he could chew. And apparently the Dravenholm brothers thought he was trying to assemble some kind of harem? Where did they get that idea? But then again, Leora had admitted she liked him. Luna had lied about not having any interest in him, and was clearly upset about something related to the three new girls. Larissa was, and from the outside, especially for protective brothers, it probably looked exactly like Arturo had described. A boy collecting girls, accumulating romantic interests without consideration for the complications. Ren put a hand to his head, feeling a headache forming behind his eyes. The kind that came from emotional exhaustion rather than physical strain. But the library. Larissa is in the library. He had to talk to her, explain something about the three girls, about how he wasn't accumulating anyone nor damaging the school or Noble's public image, about how honestly he had no idea what he was doing in any aspect of this. But first he needed a moment to breathe, because he'd just been threatened by three of the kingdom's most powerful nobles about not breaking their sister's heart. And Ren wasn't even sure what kind of relationship he had with Larissa to begin with. Then that kiss, which still seemed like he dreamed it, returned to his mind. Had it been real? A product of fever and injury? Something between? This is a disaster, he thought, not for the first time that day. And he had the suspicion it was going to get worse before it got better, especially when he had to talk to Leora and Luna, whose mana had been more agitated than Larissa's, more violent, more controlled, which somehow made it more frightening. But first, the library. First, Larissa. One disaster at a time. Ren found Larissa in a corner of the library, surrounded by books. She clearly wasn't reading anymore. He sensed her before seeing her completely. Her mana was a combination of emotions that Ren had caught easily. Embarrassment, anxiety, and something deeper he couldn't completely identify. Something vulnerable that she usually kept buried beneath layers of noble composure. But the most notable thing was resignation. She already knew he was coming. Like him, she'd also felt his now not-so-hidden mana approaching. And in her resigned mana, it was evident she decided not to flee this time. Ren approached slowly, his steps deliberately unhurried to give her time to relax. When he reached her table, he stopped a meter away, giving her space, not crowding her when she was already uncomfortable. "Can I sit?" he asked with his softest voice. Larissa nodded without looking at him, her eyes fixed on a book of lineage history that she definitely wasn't reading. Ren sat, the silence extending between them for several seconds that felt longer than they were. The library's ambient sounds, distant page turns, soft footsteps, whispered conversations, seemed to fade, leaving just the two of them in their bubble of tension. "Larissa," he finally began, searching for words that wouldn't make things worse. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "No," Larissa interrupted him, her voice surprisingly firm despite the tremor beneath it. She finally looked up to meet his eyes. You don't need to apologize. It's me again. She sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly with the release of her held breath. Although I always try to appear and maintain the dignified facade, in the end, I'm an immature girl like always. Rin laughed. Chapter 654, Taming the Fifth Year, Pledge, End. Rin was still laughing. He couldn't help it. The idea of Larissa, the most controlled and diplomatic person he knew, calling herself immature was so absurd that the laughter simply burst out. It wasn't mockery, just genuine amusement at the disconnect between her self-perception and reality. Larissa puffed her cheeks, her expression transforming into something between offended and embarrassed. The gesture was so childish and genuine that it made Rin doubt the point he was about to make. But, no, it's not about appearance, he thought. Don't laugh, she protested, though there was no real anger in her voice. More like embarrassed indignation. Rin raised his hand quickly, still smiling, but trying to control himself. No, don't take it wrong. It's just that I find it funny you call yourself immature when you're the most mature person I know. At almost inhuman levels. Larissa looked at him with skepticism, one eyebrow raised. Really? Really? Rin confirmed, his smile softening into a less amused one. Look, my father always told me something about women. He said that with my mother and all the girls and women he met in his life, he learned that a man should apologize and just accept the blame. That way one was happier, because from what he knew, it was very difficult for a woman to accept her mistakes. He paused, considering his words carefully. This was delicate territory, potentially offensive if phrased wrong or left halfway. And he told me that when I learned to accept errors even without knowing what they were, I'd be a mature man. But I realize it's not true. You can know all your mistakes if you try hard enough to understand. And I know because I realize not all are like that. Maybe I've seen it with several people, but at least not with you. He looked at Larissa directly, meeting her eyes with sincerity that made looking away impossible. So I think that capacity of yours to accept when you're wrong demonstrates you're not immature. Not at all. You try hard to understand. Even though we think differently, like different things and are different, you showed me it's just a matter of analyzing carefully what seems normal to us but could bother others. The words hung between them, heavier than their simple phrasing suggested. An acknowledgement of her efforts, her growth, her willingness. Larissa sighed and leaned back in her chair, but this time with a small smile touching her lips. Thank you. She let the silence settle for a moment before continuing, gathering her thoughts. It's surprising and stressful that you worry about and observe others so much but don't realize why you make us sigh. Could it be that humility implies denial? Larissa looked at the ceiling and whispered so low it could have been a thought, wondering about the disconnect between his self-perception and reality. There's nothing to thank, really, Rin began. But I still feel immature. Because there's something I want. Her voice interrupted him despite being soft, vulnerable, and I can't find the maturity to make it happen. Take it. Rin didn't completely understand what she was referring to, but he spoke anyway. If that's the case, he said carefully, choosing words that felt safe, then it's still okay. Larissa blinked, looking at him with confusion. Why are you so sure it's okay? It's still okay, Rin repeated, his expression becoming more serious but also warmer. You have a long life ahead. I don't see the point in rushing maturity when you're already so far ahead of all of us. I'm ahead, Larissa repeated, the word tasting strange in her mouth. Yes, Rin nodded, conviction in his voice. You have options, time to decide exactly what you want and how to get it. You don't need to rush. Larissa felt something warm expanding in her chest. She knew he didn't mean exactly what she wanted, but Rin had hit the nail on the head without realizing it. Without completely understanding what she was talking about, he'd said exactly what she needed to hear. His manner confirmed it. Pure sincerity, no hidden meanings, just genuine care. Maybe you're right, she said finally, her smile becoming more authentic. There's no rush. Rin smiled too, clearly relieved that the tension was dissolving. His shoulders dropped slightly, the worry lines around his eyes smoothing. But then Larissa straightened slightly, her expression becoming more serious. Strategic, the diplomat returning from beneath the vulnerable girl. Then I want you to promise something. Rin blinked at the change in tone, caught off guard by the shift. Promise what? If you say there's plenty of time, Larissa said carefully, but if things seem to advance very quickly, you're going to help me with your entire being not to lose what I want. Rin frowned slightly, turning over the strange request in his mind. Help her not lose something? If things advance very quickly? Is a bit of paranoia or insecurity. I suppose it's something she wants a lot and fears losing if she doesn't hurry to obtain it. It could be about her studies, or her noble responsibilities, or maybe some projects she had in mind. Larissa always had several plans in progress, multiple schemes running simultaneously. And if it was about helping her, as she'd asked, then of course he could do it, right? What kind of friend would refuse? Okay, he said finally. If I can help you, I'll do it without doubt. No, Larissa insisted, her voice becoming firmer, her eyes fixed on his with an intensity that made Rin go very still, like prey suddenly aware of a predator's focus. It's a promise, Run, not just an if I can. A real promise. Rin swallowed at the seriousness in her expression. A promise about what exactly? That when I'm ready to pursue what I want, Larissa said slowly, making sure each word was clear, deliberate, impossible to misinterpret later. You're going to make sure I have time to pursue it without rush. That you're going to do everything possible to listen to my request and my desires. That you're not going to let doors close before I can even reach to knock on them. There was something in how she said it, in the way her cheeks flushed slightly on the last part, that made Rin feel he was missing something important in the conversation. Like reading a book where someone had torn out crucial pages. But it was also Larissa, his friend, his mentor in noble protocols, the person who had helped him many times without asking anything in return. If she needed him to promise to help her, support her in whatever she wanted to pursue, to feel less anxious and paranoid. I promise, he said, his voice firm, conviction making the words feel heavier than he intended. When you're ready, I'll help you. I'll make sure with my body and soul that you have the time you need. Larissa smiled, and there was something in that smile that was different from her usual smiles. Brighter, more relieved, more happy in a way Rin hadn't seen in months. Like something she'd been carrying had finally been set down. Thank you, she said softly. Then, with a more playful tone, and remember, you promised. You can't take it back later. I don't take back my promises, Rin responded with seriousness. His word was his bond, always had been. I know, Larissa said, her smile widening into something that could almost be called victorious. She leaned back in her chair, some of the tension she'd been carrying for days finally dissolving. So, are you going to tell me what's really happening with those 3 girls? Rin sighed, knowing this conversation would come. It's complicated. Everything involving you is complicated, Larissa pointed out with amusement, her tone lighter now. But I have time. Okay, he conceded, settling in for a long explanation. And as Run began explaining the situation with Kasia, Serafina, and Jeanette, neither of them realized the real weight of the promise they'd just exchanged. It was a commitment, one that Run had made with complete innocence, thinking he was promising to support a friend's ambitions, and one that Larissa had asked for with full consciousness of its implications, or at least what she believed those implications to be. Chapter 655, Taming the Fifth Year, Hitch. Talking to Leora about what had happened with Aldrich's girls hadn't been as difficult as Run had anticipated. Larissa had been there, helping him explain the situation. There had been a tense moment when Rin had mentioned too soon that he'd forgiven the 3 girls, and Leora had frowned dangerously. But Larissa had interceded just in time, reframing the situation in terms Leora could understand and, eventually, accept. She wasn't too happy. Her expression had made that clear. But she understood the political pressure, the impossible positions, the lack of real choice the 3 girls had faced. Yet now came a harder part. Luna. The girls had told him they'd leave the shared room empty at the hour Luna usually arrived to give him privacy, to let him apologize alone, without an audience to make things more complicated than they already were. Rin arrived when they'd agreed, his steps slowing as he approached the door. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, dread building in his chest like gathering storm clouds. And then he saw Klein leaving the room. Rin stopped, blinking surprised. Klein saw him, and his face turned slightly red. He looked away immediately, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "I'm sorry," he muttered quickly, his voice coming out tense and strained. I can't talk by." And he left, practically fleeing down the hallway before Rin could ask what he was doing there. His steps were quick, almost running, retreating in tensions in every line of his body. Weird, Rin thought, watching him go, but he had more important things to figure out than Klein's strange behavior right now. So he approached the door and knocked softly. Luna, silence. But he could feel the mana inside the room. Erratic, fury, and darker tones Rin couldn't completely identify, like a storm contained behind fragile walls. She was there. "Luna," he tried again, keeping his voice gentle. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you." "Leave." Luna's voice came muffled through the door, but the emotion in it was clear even through the wood and the distance. "I don't want to see you now." Rin felt his chest tighten. He could feel it was a lie in her mana. No, not a full lie, a half-truth. She wanted to see him, yes, but also something else. Something complicated and painful that tangled with a desire. "Luna, I'm sorry," he said, deciding to be tactful and tell her from outside without insisting, as Larissa had suggested was an option. "About the girls, about not explaining to you before. About—" "You have nothing to apologize for," Luna interrupted him, her voice firmer now. "You can leave now. You don't need to mind or worry about anything." But Rin remained standing in front of the door, processing her words. "Don't need to worry," as if there were no reason to care, as if assuming she didn't matter enough for him to bother about her, as if she were asking him to treat her as less important than she was for him. Could he do that? Rin remembered Sirius, remembered not being able to stop him, remembered seeing Luna crying, her mana screaming pain, remembered what mattered most to Luna, her family, the Star Weavers, her light relic that was in other people's hands. Remembered the kiss, that moment where Luna had pressed her lips against his, and then denied it afterward, had said it was a mistake, that it meant nothing. It had been a lie. He also thought about Leora, about her honest confession in that tree, about her request for time just recently. Thought about Larissa, about what Julius had told him. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Was he being greedy? Trying to surround himself with all these beautiful girls without thinking about the general view or the consequences. Maybe he should leave Luna alone. Give her space. Not complicate her life more when she already had so many political and family problems to solve. But then, no. Why would I have to stop myself from helping an appreciated friend? The thought came fierce, almost angry. Would he do the same for Min? Yes, right? For Taro? For Lou? For any of his friends? Yes. It's the same. The mature feelings adults talked about, those could wait. Right now, Rin just wanted to help. "Luna," he shouted, his voice louder. The words came from somewhere deep. "I want to help you. I want to be your support. I care because you matter to me." The silence that followed was deep. Rin felt like the world had stopped breathing, waiting for her response. He could feel the emotional whirlpool in the mana on the other side of the door. More chaotic now. And then, with a broken voice, Luna spoke. "Please," her vulnerability bleeding through despite her attempts at control. "Don't insist anymore." She paused, and Rin could hear how she took a trembling breath. "If you really want to help, please distance yourself a bit." Rin felt like he'd been punched in the chest. What? "You're an obstacle to my goals, Rin," Luna continued, her voice becoming firmer though it still trembled. "Your presence complicates things, makes the decisions I need to make more difficult. So if you really care about me, if you really want to help." She stopped again, and this time Rin heard something that could have been a suppressed sob. "Back off." Rin remained paralyzed in front of the door, feeling her mana, reading the intent beneath her words, the pain and resolve. And he realized it was true. He was an obstacle. Somehow, His presence in Luna's life was complicating the things she needed to do. In that case, Rin said finally, his voice coming out sadder than he'd intended. Okay. He stepped away from the door, taking a physical step back that felt symbolic. Final. I'll distance myself. Silence from the other side. Rin waited a moment, maybe hoping Luna would change her mind, that she'd open the door and tell him she didn't mean it, that they could work through this together. But the door remained closed. The mana on the other side continued being a whirlwind, but there was no movement toward the door. No sound of footsteps. No click of a lock turning. I'm sorry, Rin added softly, the words barely audible even to himself, for complicating things. And he left. Each step away from that door felt heavier than the previous one. He didn't know that moments later, on the other side, Luna had collapsed against the door, her back sliding until she was sitting on the floor. Her hands covered her mouth, trying to contain the sobs that threatened to escape. Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot and bitter and impossible to stop. Her shadow wolf materialized, whining softly and pressing against her side, offering comfort it didn't know how to give. Warren walked through an empty hallway. Oblivious to the pain on the other side of the door, he could only think about one thing. I'm an obstacle. And if that was true, then the best thing he could do for Luna was exactly what she'd asked. Distance himself from her, even if it hurt more than he'd anticipated. Even if every part of him wanted to turn around, knock down that door, and solve the problems magically. But he couldn't. He would be unable to solve it. He didn't know how. Chapter 656, Taming the Fifth Year Reckoning. The temporary meeting room of the Educational Consortium within the Academy wasn't particularly large or impressive. Polished white stone walls. A few high windows allowing natural light to filter through in pale, dusty shafts. A long table with straight-back chairs that actively discouraged comfort. Everything designed with deliberate intent to be functional, neutral, stripped of the specific ostentation that characterized any of the noble houses. A space where, in theory, decisions were made by merit and not by influence. In theory, Selfra Ashenway entered with steady steps. No rush, but with purpose. Her presence filled the space immediately, not through fanfare, but through simple inevitability. Like when a storm approaches and the air pressure changes. They were all already there. Aldrich Galehart had positioned himself near the left end of the table, his posture relaxed, but with that penetrating attention that never left him. The Pegasus markings on his skin were almost invisible today. He had dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there a few months ago. Interesting, Selfra thought. The exam results affected him more than I expected. Lady Morgaine occupied the opposite side. She sat so upright, it seemed someone had inserted a steel rod through her spine. Her face was a poor mask of aristocratic composure. Selfra noted the tension in her jaw. The tension that probably came from months of careful planning that had ended collapsing spectacularly before her eyes. Balthin, of course, had seated himself in the center as if he were presiding over the meeting. Because that's how Balthin was. A man who entered spaces belonging to others with the confidence of someone who believed all spaces would eventually belong to him. His smile was kind, his manners impeccable, and every word he spoke carried some hidden meaning beneath the surface. Selfra had found him distasteful for decades. She knew exactly what kind of vermin he was. Lady Defina was also present, representative of another house that had been collaborating lately with the opportunists. She'd always been ambitious but cautious. The type of noble who waited to see which way the wind blew before committing completely. Like all the other vermin here. Today, Defina avoided direct eye contact with Selfra. Her perfectly manicured hands toyed with a ring on her index finger, twisting it back and forth in a nervous rhythm. Nervous, then? Good. Beside Balthin, as if his political shadow could protect them, sat the representatives of the Starweaver Knight faction. Two men who shared some undeserved features of Luna, but with far more ugly expressions etched into their faces. Lord Dorian and Lord Magnus Starweaver. Luna's uncles. The ones who had spent the last months trying to wrest control of the Northern Territory from their disappeared brother. who had used every opportunity to undermine Luna's legitimacy as heir. Selphra had tolerated them because the situation with the mutant beast required certain political flexibility. Lady Ashenway. Balefin was the first to speak, his voice carrying that false warmth he'd perfected during decades of manipulation. He rose slightly, a gesture of courtesy that didn't reach his eyes. What an unexpected surprise. We didn't know you would be personally attending this tutor committee meeting. No. Selphra arched an eyebrow, stopping at the end of the table without sitting. She preferred the height advantage and had no back pain or fatigue even at her age. How strange. Considering this meeting is about irregularities in tutor assignments, I thought your allies, the ones around you that I personally collected, would have told you already. Silence fell. The uncomfortable kind, where everyone knew exactly what she was referring to, but no one wanted to be the first to admit it. Aldrich cleared his throat, breaking the tension with forced casualness. If you brought us here about this trimester's assignments, I assure you everything was done following the consortium's established protocols. Each tutor was paired with students based on availability and... Availability? Selphra interrupted, her tone still soft but with an edge that made Aldrich stop mid-word. Or was it based on how much certain nobles were willing to pay to ensure their interests were protected? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, frost forming even on the words. Those are serious accusations, Morgane said, her voice so mechanical that each syllable sounded rehearsed. Performed. I hope you have evidence before. Evidence? Selphra pulled some signed and sealed papers from her robes, slamming them onto the table with a dry sound that resonated like thunder. The impact made several of them flinch. Do you mean the records of mana crystal transfers between Lord Balefin and 3 members of the assignment committee? Or would you prefer to discuss the letters Lady Morgane sent offering donations in exchange for the tutor position with Luna Starweaver? Morgane paled, only a little, barely perceptible to most, but Selphra caught it. That minute draining of color, that fraction of a second where the mask slipped and revealed the panic beneath. She didn't even need to read the mana. That's... Morgane began, scrambling for words. Bribery? Selphra completed, her voice carrying the certainty of undeniable truth. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Balefin laughed. The sound was light, friendly, as if they were discussing something amusing over wine. Come now, Lady Ashenway. Bribery is such an ugly word. In noble circles, we prefer to call it securing the best educational opportunities for young talents. Donations to the consortium are investments in the future of... Call it whatever you want. Selphra cut him off, her patience visibly thinning now. Her mana began filtering out slightly, pressing against the air in the room, making it heavier, harder to breathe. But the facts are clear. You manipulated the assignments. You placed incompetent or malicious tutors with specific students, all to try sabotaging those who didn't align with your interests. The pressure increased, not dramatically, just enough to remind everyone present exactly who held more power in this room. But Dorian Starweaver still stood abruptly, his face flushing red. And what if we did? We already have the 2 stars. Luna is too young and has no right to... Sit down. Selphra's voice wasn't a shout. It wasn't even particularly loud, but it carried such weight of absolute authority, such implicit promise of devastating consequences, that Dorian sat immediately. His body obeyed before his mind could process the command, like his legs had stopped listening to him and only responded to her. Magnus placed a hand on his brother's shoulder, his eyes never leaving Selphra. With all respect, Lady Ashenway, our interests in Starweaver territory are irrelevant to this discussion, Selphra said without looking at him. Her gaze swept the room, touching each face, weighing, judging. This meeting is about corruption in the educational system, not about your pathetic power struggles. She moved around the table slowly, deliberately. Let me be very clear, she continued, her voice lowering but somehow filling more of the space. Gale Hart. Selphra looked at him directly, those ancient eyes boring into him. I know exactly what you did. I know you accepted the assignment as Ren Pattender's tutor with the intention of giving him incomplete information, of subtly sabotaging his preparation for the exams. She paused, letting the words sink in. And I know you failed spectacularly. For the first time in his political life, Aldrich had no immediate response. His mouth opened, closed. The words wouldn't come. His famous silver tongue turned to lead in his mouth. And you, Selphira, turned toward Morgaine. 3 months teaching Luna obsolete protocols, hoping she'd make a fool of herself before the evaluators. Morgaine clasped her hands in her lap. Students sometimes need additional challenges to. If you think you can find a valid excuse, you overestimate yourself. Don't look for intelligence in that small head of yours. There is none. Selphira interrupted. We all know exactly what you were doing. The question now is, what am I going to do about it? The silence that followed was absolute. No one dared breathe too loudly. Selphira let it stretch. She counted 5 seconds in her mind, letting the tension build. But Balefin leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the table in steady rhythm. The casual gesture of someone who still believed they had cards to play, who thought they could negotiate their way out. Lady Ashenway, let's be reasonable. Yes, there were irregularities. But removing tutors from their positions now, in the middle of the academic year, would cause a bigger scandal. It would affect innocent students. It would damage the consortium's reputation more than. I already thought of that, Selphira interrupted, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction, as if he'd walked right into her trap. And you're right. Removing them would cause more problems than it would solve. That's why I'm not going to do it. She saw relief appear on faces around the table. Small size, shoulders that relaxed slightly, tension bleeding out in visible waves. Idiots, all of them. Instead, Selphira continued, her voice acquiring an almost pleasant tone that was somehow far more menacing than her previous fury. You're going to continue in your positions. You're going to keep being tutors. And you're going to pay fines so large that your houses will lose half their servants for years. Chapter 657, Taming the Fifth Year, Reckoning 2. That's, Magnus began, his voice faltering. Fair. Selphira turned toward him with an expression that was all teeth and no warmth, like a beast showing its fangs. Do you really want to talk to me about fairness? You, who have been trying to steal your niece's inheritance while her father is missing. Please. The words dripped with contempt. Magnus' mouth snapped shut with an audible click. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped beneath his skin. Beside him, Dorian had gone perfectly still, like prey hoping the predator would lose interest if he didn't move. But there's more, Selphira continued, pacing around the table again. Because clearly I can't trust you to behave without supervision. So I'm going to assign you a, let's call it an observer. Someone who will ensure everything is proper, who will report directly to me and the castle any additional irregularities. Her fingers trailed along the back of one of the chairs as she moved. A spy? Aldrich said, his voice tight, strained, since she was behind him. You're going to put a spy to watch us? Monitor sounds better, Selphira smiled. And yes, exactly that. The implications settled like a wet, heavy blanket, suffocating. Every lesson would be watched, every interaction scrutinized, every word weighed, measured, and reported. No privacy, no room to maneuver, no way to operate in the shadows anymore. Balefin leaned back in his chair. His fingers resumed their steady drumming on the armrest, the rhythm slightly faster now. A tell, though he probably didn't realize it. Interesting. And I suppose this monitor will be someone of your complete trust. Someone who will report exactly what you want to hear. Someone, Selphira corrected, her voice taking on an edge of steel, who will report the truth. Something that clearly none of you are capable of doing consistently. She stopped her pacing, positioning herself where she could see all their faces at once, reading their reactions, cataloging their fears. And if we refuse? Defina asked, her voice trembling a bit. If we decide this is too much? Selphira stopped, turned, and looked at her directly. The weight of that gaze was huge, ancient, pitiless. Does anyone want to find out? The question felt like a drawn blade. Absolute silence. No one moved. No one even dared to breathe. Because they all knew. All understood clearly what refusing would mean. Acting now, making any move against her, would most likely destroy their reputations even more than simply enduring the fines and supervision, and in the end it would be the same, but more expensive. Good, she said after a moment that felt too long. I'm glad to see we're all being reasonable here. The word reasonable sounded like mockery in her mouth. This is extortion, Morgaine murmured, the words escaping before she could stop them. A moment of weakness, of letting her facade crack. No, Selphira corrected her gently, but the gentleness was somehow worse than anger would have been. These are consequences, something you're clearly unfamiliar with, but that you're about to learn intimately. She pulled out more documents from her robes. Thicker ones. Official ones. These are debt contracts. You'll sign them now. Binding agreements for the fines, with payment schedules and interest rates should you fail to meet the deadlines. Interest. Balthan's voice cracked slightly. His composure was fracturing, pieces falling away to reveal the desperate man beneath. You're charging us interest? Of course. Selphira's smile widened. Did you think you could take your sweet time to pay? Corrupt business deserves appropriate rates. She placed the contracts on the table, sliding one toward each guilty party. Sign. It wasn't a request. After collecting signatures on the debt contracts, Selphira gathered the papers with satisfaction. The documents disappeared back into her robes, secured and sealed. Evidence of their corruption and her victory. Excellent. Selphira moved toward the door, her steps light now. Almost cheerful. Then you're dismissed. Return to your positions. The monitor will report to you tomorrow. I suggest you use that time to reflect on your life choices. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Inside the room, no one spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, Aldrich exhaled slowly. The sound broke the spell, released the tension just enough for movement to become possible again. Well, that could have gone worse. Worse. Morgaine looked at him with incredulity blazing in her eyes. Her careful mask had shattered completely now, revealing raw emotion beneath. How the hell could it have been worse? We're going to be fined until... She could have declared war to try destroying us completely. Aldrich interrupted, his voice tired. Drained. He felt decades older than he had an hour ago. Instead, she's giving us fines and supervision. Only because she can't afford an internal war now, Balthan murmured, his fingers still drumming on the table. That constant rhythm, faster now. Nervous energy, finding outlet. With the beast attacks increasing, with the situation on the external frontiers and underground, trying to completely destroy us would destabilize the city's defense too much. He leaned back, and slowly, a smile began forming on his face. Growing, spreading. It was the smile of a man who'd just found a loophole, who'd spotted an opportunity in disaster. Which means we can continue with the main plan. Dorian leaned forward, eagerness replacing some of his earlier fear. When will we do it? Patience, Balthan responded, raising a hand in a calming gesture. If we can keep all our cards, that's better. And having a spy doesn't change anything fundamental. We can still observe how they perform during the semester. There are many ways to work around supervision too. His smile widened, confidence returning. At the end of the year, if it looks like they're going to succeed, we simply make the final move. Save it until then. Are you sure she'll accept it? Defina asked, her voice barely a whisper, afraid to speak the plan aloud, even in this private space. I'm certain, Balthan said with a small smile that carried absolute conviction. And the boy won't be able to do anything no matter how strong he is. Though, he paused, considering, perhaps we should listen to Aldrich, and before he grows too much, try to win his favor instead. The suggestion hung in the air. A pivot, a different approach to the same goal. Aldrich heard this in silence, his expression impenetrable. But inside his mind, something else was occurring. Something shifting, changing. Fundamental beliefs cracking under pressure. Selphira was right. He had failed with Run. Spectacularly. The boy hadn't just passed all the exams with perfection. He'd done it in a way that made clear Aldrich had never had the control he thought he possessed. Never even close. And now, listening to Balthan talk, as always, about continuing the schemes, about still trying to bring Run to their side. Do I really want to keep going down this path? The question surprised him, shocked him even, because the answer, honestly, was that he wasn't sure anymore. Outside the meeting room, Sulfura walked down the hallway. Her expression was neutral again, the mask of authority firmly in place. Her assistant appeared from the shadows where she'd been waiting patiently. A woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "How did it go?" the woman asked quietly. As expected, Sulfura responded, her voice thoughtful. "They accepted the terms too easily." Too easily? The assistant's tone sharpened. She knew Sulfura well enough to recognize when something bothered her. It didn't upset them as much as it should have, Sulfura admitted, and the admission clearly annoyed her. A frown creased her forehead, aging her features. Run, Luna, and Leora are doing too well in their exams. The schemes to sabotage them through tutors failed. So the question is, how do they think they'll achieve it now? You believe they have a way? Sulfura nodded slowly, her eyes distant. Which means we only have to discover what method they might use to get what they want. If they accepted this so easily, it's because they know that obtaining the enormous territory and a larger part of the second castle chamber would make the fines look like pocket change. That's what this was really about. Not education, not students, but power, territory, and control. It always came back to that. And you're going to allow it? The assistant's voice carried carefully neutral curiosity. Wouldn't it be better to attack them directly? Sulfura smiled, and this time there was genuine amusement in the gesture. Of course I'm going to allow it. We can't have internal battles right now. She paused, considering. But Leora and Ren don't worry me too much. Especially Run. She stopped, turning to look out a window toward the academy grounds below. Students moved like ants between buildings. Small, seeming insignificant from this height. But one of those ants was anything but insignificant. You believe the boy can't be sabotaged? It's a battle of information. Sulfura nodded again, her reflection in the glass showing satisfaction. And they don't know anything about him. At least they've never looked inside him like I have. And whatever they do, they won't be able to handle that beast. They won't even discover it before it's too late. Chapter 658, Taming the Fifth Year, Distance. The end-of-semester exams had arrived, but time hadn't passed without important events. 3 months. 90 days where Larissa and Leora had tried everything they could think of to make Ren approach Luna again. Messages through Mayo. Ignored. Attempts at casual hallway conversations. Avoided with spatial jumps that left only air where she'd been seconds before. "Don't say that. There's no way you're an obstacle," Leora had said after her first conversation with Ren following the Luna situation. Her expression had been somber, worried in a way Ren rarely saw in her. "Give me a few days. Surely she just needs to process some things." The words had carried hope. Conviction that this was temporary, just a matter of time and the right approach. When Leora finally returned, it wasn't with good news. "She distanced herself from me too," she'd admitted, sitting heavily in a chair in Ren's room. "I asked her what was happening. I told her we could help. And she just looked at me and said she couldn't explain it right now." The hurt in Leora's voice had been real, because Luna never shut them out. Not like this. Not completely. Larissa had gotten similar results. "It's strange," the princess had said, her brows furrowed, analyzing the situation as if it were a noble protocol problem she could solve with sufficient study. "Luna normally would ask us for help. She always has. When she had problems with her father, when her family's pressure became too much, she always let us in. But not this time. This time, Luna had built big walls. And the most disconcerting thing of all was that she formally requested a private room from the academy administration. Platinum students had that right. They always had. A privilege of their rank, their status, their proven excellence. But Luna, Leora, and Run had never exercised it. They preferred staying together with their groups, maintaining that connection forged during years of studying, training, and surviving together. The bond that had seemed unbreakable. Until now, the request was approved immediately. Of course it was. Luna Starweaver, heir of one of the kingdom's oldest houses, platinum-ranked student with an almost perfect record. Who would dare refuse her? Luna had moved out. The days became weeks, and the weeks became a month. Her new room was far enough away to avoid them as much as possible. She wants to be alone. I shouldn't try anymore. But Leora and Larissa had insisted, so Ren had tried again. He'd walked to her new door one night, had stood outside for almost 5 minutes, trying to gather the courage to knock. His hand had risen and fallen 3 times before he finally committed. Finally, he did it. 3 soft knocks. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet hallway. "Luna, it's me. I just want to talk. Please." Silence. But he could feel her mana on the other side. Agitated, like always when he was near. A whirlpool of emotions he couldn't completely decipher, but that hurt just to perceive. "Luna." His voice came out softer than intended. Almost pleading. Nothing. No response. No acknowledgement. Just that churning mana and the solid barrier of a closed door between them. In the end, he'd left. Because what else could he do? Force his way in? Demand she speak to him? That wasn't respect. That wasn't friendship. That was something else entirely. Something he refused to become. Taro found him that night in the library, surrounded by books he wasn't really reading, just staring at pages without processing the words, his mind somewhere else completely. "Brother." Taro sat across from him without ceremony, his expression serious. "You have to concentrate. Better give her space." Ren looked up, blinking as if just waking. "What?" "Luna." Taro clarified unnecessarily. They both knew what this was about. Would have been about for weeks. "She asked for distance, and I know it hurts. I know you want to help. But sometimes it's better to stop worrying about what you can't fix, right?" Rin sank into his chair. What if she needs help and won't tell me because someone's stopping her? It was the thought that had haunted him, kept him awake at night. The possibility that Luna was in trouble, real trouble, and he was respecting her wishes while she suffered. "It won't be your fault," Taro reminded him, leaning forward, making sure Rin heard this. Really heard it. She distanced herself first. "You're disrespecting that. And she has Leora and Larissa if she really needs something. You're not abandoning her. You're just giving her the space she asked for." It made sense. Rin hated that it made sense. Because sense didn't make the worry disappear. Didn't fill the Luna-shaped hole that had appeared in his daily life. "When did you get so wise?" Rin asked, attempting lightness he didn't feel. "I've always been wise," Taro responded with a small smile. "You just don't pay attention because you're too busy being a genius at everything else." Despite everything, Rin laughed. It was brief. Small, but genuine. A moment of real amusement breaking through the cloud of worry that had been suffocating him. "Thanks. That's what brothers are for," Taro shrugged. Then, more seriously, his expression sobering. "But really, Rin, the end of semester exams are close. The big ones. The ones that matter. You need to focus." And he was right. Because these weren't ordinary exams. These were the evaluations that would determine rankings, opportunities, futures. During those 3 months, Ren also continued seeing the girls for small periods occasionally to protect them. Aldrich had kept the offhand arrangement, and the sessions had become something different, something less formal and more human. One day, Serafina arrived clearly frustrated, muttering about her history instructor who insisted she memorize genealogies that no sane person needed to know. Her usual composed demeanor had cracked, revealing the exasperated teenager beneath the aristocratic training. Who cares that Lord Watch's name from the 4th century was third cousin to Lady Walkersington? She complained, dropping onto the couch without her usual grace, sprawling in a way that would have horrified her etiquette teacher. How is that relevant to anything? Run, who had been struggling with similar information in his classes with Arturo, couldn't help relaxing and laughing a little. Arturo also made me memorize the succession lines of 3 extinct noble houses last week. Extinct, as in they don't exist anymore. The absurdity of it hit him fresh. "Why?" Jeanette asked, seeming genuinely confused. "What's the point?" Something about understanding historical patterns of alliances. Rim made air quotes with his fingers, mimicking Arturo's serious tone. It was as exciting as it sounds. Which was to say, not at all. "Nobles are ridiculous," Kasia declared. then seemed to remember she herself was noble. Her expression shifted, becoming sheepish. Us. We're ridiculous. We really are, Serafina agreed. And suddenly all three girls were laughing, the sound filling the room, genuine and unguarded. And somehow, complaining about teachers and instructors became their recurring theme. Common ground that made the formal sessions feel more like just talking with people close to his age. People who understood the absurdity of noble education, who shared his frustrations with memorizing useless information, who made him feel less alone in navigating this strange world. It was almost nice, in a way Rin hadn't expected when Aldrich first introduced them. Chapter 659, Taming the Fifth Year, Anticipation. The mid-year interscholastic tournaments were rapidly approaching, adding another layer of pressure to everything else. Like Rin needed more stress. They weren't like the first protocol exams. These were competitions between the three main academies, designed to showcase combat ability, academic achievements, contributions, and yes, also noble protocol, but in competitive contexts. A complete evaluation. A public display of their level. It's basically a full 2 weeks of showing everything you've learned, Zhao explained during training session. And yes, before you ask, it's exhausting. His voice carried experience. Great, Rin muttered, wiping his own sweat with the back of his hand. Just what he needed indeed. 2 weeks of constant pressure while worrying about Luna and dealing with those nobles who thought he was a fraud. But, Zhao added with something resembling a smile, a rare expression on his usually stern face. It's also your opportunity to shut up all those nobles who keep whispering that your achievements are fabricated. That captured Ren's attention, so his head snapped up. They're still saying that. The Night Star Weavers in particular, Zhao confirmed. They're being very vocal about how your successes are just illusionist performances and self-er theater. The tournaments are your chance to prove otherwise, where they can't argue at being political influence in front of everyone's eyes and mana senses. Something tautened in Ren's chest. It wasn't fear. Then I'll have to make sure they can't argue anything. That's the spirit, Zhao approved, nodding with satisfaction. Now, 20 more complaint forms. I'm not letting you go in there anything less than perfectly prepared. While Rin began his tasks, his mind was already spinning. If the Night Star Weavers wanted proof, he'd give them proof. The kind they couldn't deny, couldn't explain away, couldn't attribute to anyone's influence but his own. He'd show them exactly what Rin Patender was capable of, and they would never doubt him again. But the good mood didn't last long. Rin was sitting in the Platinum Student Dining Hall, pushing food around his plate without really eating it, when Leora slid into the seat across from him. The movement was smooth, practiced now. You look terrible, she said without preamble, her tone carrying concern beneath the usual frankness. No sugarcoating. Never with Leora, just direct observation. Thanks, Rin responded dryly, not looking up from his plate. Just what I needed to hear. It's true, she insisted, studying him with those eyes that saw too much. When was the last time you slept properly? Rin had to think about that. His mind felt fuzzy, like trying to see through fog. The 12th. Run, it's the 15th. Then 3 days. 3 days, Leora repeated, and the exasperation in her voice was practiced too. She sighed, the feeling equal parts frustration and affection. You can't win the exams if you collapse from exhaustion before they even begin. I have high vitality. I can sleep after the exams, Rin muttered, finally taking a bite of food that tasted like nothing in his mouth. Texture without flavor. Substance without satisfaction. Everything had been like that lately. Distant. That's the wrong spirit, and you know it. Leora leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly, even though the dining hall was always empty in the Platinum section. Run. I know you're worried about Luna. We all are. But I'm also worried about you. You need to focus. I'm trying. The words came out more defensive than he intended. Because he was trying. He'd been trying for weeks. Not hard enough. Leora reached across the table, placing her hand over his. The gesture was brief, barely some seconds, but gave some warmth that Rin needed. For now, you have to trust that Luna knows what she's doing. And you have to trust that Larissa and I are taking care of her the best we can. Trust. Such a simple word. Such a complicated concept. Ren wanted to argue. Wanted to insist there was something he should be doing, some way to fix this. Some action he could take that would make everything right again. But looking at Leora's face, seeing the determination mixed with her own worry, finally he nodded. Okay, he conceded, the word feeling like surrender. Like giving up. I'm going to focus. He took a deep breath, forcing the words out. I'm going to let Luna go. For now. Good. Leora leaned back, satisfaction crossing her face. Mission accomplished, at least partially. Then, with a smile that carried a competitive edge. Then we can talk about how we're going to approach these exams. Obviously, I know we'll be competing against each other, Leora said. But there's no reason we can't prepare together. Exchange strategies. Identify weaknesses. Help each other be the best possible. She paused, her smile widening. And then crush you completely in the end. Despite everything, Ren laughed. The sound surprised him. Genuine amusement breaking through the fog of worry and exhaustion that had been suffocating him for weeks. You have confidence. I like that. Learn from the best. Leora winked at him. Now finish eating, then we're going to the training room. Larissa is already there. And just like that, something in Ren's chest loosened. Not disappeared, not solved, but eased. He'd been trapped for months in interpersonal drama he didn't know how to navigate. Months feeling powerless in situations where his power didn't matter, where his intelligence couldn't solve the problem, where being strong or smart, talented, or even lucky meant nothing against the complexities of human emotion and relationships. But this was different. This was competition, skill against skill, preparation against preparation. The kinds of challenges where he could trust his strengths, where hard work and smart strategy could make the difference, where he finally would have control over something, where the rules were clear and the path to victory was straightforward, be better than everyone else. Warren finally began eating with real appetite, food suddenly tasting like something again. He didn't notice the figure watching them from the shadows in the corner from the other side of the dining hall. Luna was there, her presence almost invisible thanks to Ren's technique and some artifacts, unless you knew to look for her specifically. She'd gotten good at that over the past weeks, at being present but unseen, at watching without being watched. She'd been there during this conversation, watching Ren and Leora talk from afar like always now, watching Leora's hand on Ren's, watching her friend and rival, no, her former rival, offer the support Luna knew Ren needed, the support she couldn't give him. Her hands closed into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. The pain was sharp, grounding, keeping her from doing something stupid like jumping over there, like breaking the distance she'd so carefully constructed. I'm sorry, she thought. The words directed at Ren, though, she'd never say them aloud, though she couldn't let him hear. I'm so sorry. But she didn't move, didn't approach, didn't try to join them, because she'd made her decision. And now she had to live with the consequences. Chapter 660, Taming the Fifth Year, The Price. Luna stared at the ceiling of her new private room, counting the geometric shapes for the umpteenth time that night. 4356. Always 4,356. No matter how many times she counted them, hoping the number would magically change and give her something new to focus on, something that would distract her mind from the constant whirlpool of thoughts that wouldn't let her sleep. The patterns never changed. Her enormous wolf was curled on one side of the bed, his presence a silent comfort. Occasionally, the beast would turn his head to look at her with those eyes that seemed to understand too much. Too much about her pain. Too much about her choices. I know, Luna whispered to the darkness, her voice barely audible even in the quiet room. I'm a coward. The wolf made a low sound in his throat. Not disagreement. It was understanding, maybe, or pity. Luna wasn't sure which was worse. She sat up in bed, hugging her knees against her chest. A childish position. Vulnerable. The kind of posture she'd never allow anyone else to see. But here, in the darkness of her self-imposed solitary room, she could allow herself to be small, could allow herself to be weak, could strip away all the masks and armor and just hurt. Her eyes drifted toward her desk drawer, the third from the top, locked, though the key was unnecessary when she could simply use her mana to take what was inside from the shadows. But there was something about the ritual of the key, something about the deliberate act of unlocking, of choosing to see, that made the difference between an impulse and a decision, between losing control and maintaining it, however tenuously. She shouldn't open it. She'd already looked inside too many times today, 3 times during the day, 2 more after dinner. And now, in the depth of night, she felt the urge again, like an addiction, like scratching a wound that never healed, that kept tearing open, bleeding fresh every time she touched it. She rose from the bed. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold stone floor as she approached the desk. The wolf followed her with its gaze, its expression carrying something that might have been concern if beasts could truly feel such things. Or maybe they could. Maybe her wolf understood her better than any person did right now. The key was hidden behind a book on noble protocols that she never read. Ironic, considering her entire life lately had been reduced to protocols. Protocols of courtesy, protocols of study, protocols of how to maintain distance from the people you love most without them realizing you're tearing yourself apart from the inside. The drawer opened with a soft click, and there it was, the small portrait, barely the size of her palm. The kind of miniature some nobles carried as personal tokens, reminders of loved ones during long journeys. Luna lifted it with hands that trembled slightly, fingers brushing the smooth surface like touching something sacred, something fragile that might shatter if held too tightly. The woman in the portrait smiled while hugging a younger Luna and a light cat. It wasn't a big, exaggerated smile, not the political smile Luna had learned to perfect. It was small, warm, the kind of smile that reached the eyes and made them shine with joy. Real happiness. The kind Luna barely remembered feeling anymore. She had dark blue hair, almost black in certain lights. The same eyes Luna saw in the mirror every morning. The same jawline, the same nose shape. But there was something else. Something in the expression that Luna had never been able to replicate no matter how many times she tried. Peace. Her mother had peace. True peace, the kind that came from deep within, from accepting yourself and your place in the world, from being loved and knowing it completely, before everything fell apart, before happiness became a luxury the Starweaver family couldn't afford. Luna closed her eyes, pressing the portrait against her chest. Her wolf moved its head closer, pressing his enormous nose against her leg, offering mute comfort that somehow meant more than any words could have. "Mom," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking on the word. "Tell me I'm doing the right thing." Of course there was no answer. Portraits didn't respond, no matter how much you begged, no matter how desperately you needed guidance from someone who couldn't give it anymore. But sometimes, in her weakest moments, Luna could swear she felt something in the mana. A warmth, a presence, something that told her she wasn't completely alone, that somewhere, somehow, her mother was still watching, still caring. Probably it was just her imagination. Probably. She returned the portrait, closing the drawer with more force than necessary. The sound echoed in the silent room like thunder, like finality. And then, because she was a masochist and apparently hadn't learned anything about mental self-preservation, Luna approached her closet. At the back, hidden behind academy uniforms and formal dresses she rarely wore, there was a small box. This one didn't have a lock. Didn't need one. Because Luna opened it even more frequently than the drawer with the portrait. Because the addiction to this particular pain was stronger. More immediate. More relevant to her present suffering. Inside were letters. All written with the same elegant calligraphy. The kind taught to noble children from birth. Every loop and curve perfectly formed. Beautiful handwriting hiding ugly purposes. All signed with the same name. Lord Orion Starweaver. Luna took the most recent one. She unfolded it, though she'd already memorized every word. Could recite it in her sleep, had recited it in her nightmares. "Luna, I've spoken again with Magnus and Dorian. We're in agreement. The offer still stands. The price hasn't changed. If you accept our terms before the end of the year, you'll have what you seek." Luna's jaw clenched. The words were so simple, so transactional. as if they were discussing property deeds instead of her future, her freedom, her heart. I know this is difficult for you because of what Sirius taught you. I know you don't trust us, and I admit our family relationship has been tense. But in this matter, our interests align. You want to have that weapon in your hands to embrace it. We want to secure the Starweaver family's future by unifying the territories. We can let you use it on the front lines and hug it as much as you want. The words should have been comforting, should have represented compromise, a meeting in the middle. Instead, they felt like chains, like a leash just long enough to let her think she had freedom while keeping her firmly under control. It's a fair exchange. Was anything about this fair? The handsome Saya, young Jean, and even the young Goldcrest have confirmed their part. We took care to give you options so you can get the choice that suits you best. Whoever you choose is ready to proceed when you are. We only need your final confirmation. Time is running out, niece. The first exams are approaching, and after that, negotiations will become more complicated. Other factors will come into play. Other interests will get involved. Think carefully.